Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. This is the story about Deku. What if Deku married with Fuyumi Todoroki, the movie? Hope you'll enjoy this video. So before we start, please do support for more awesome content and also hit the subscribe button and share this video with your friends and also support the creator of this fanfic. I have created many playlists, check it out in the channel. So let's begin the video. The Todoroki family house was huge. His entire apartment building could easily fit inside just a courtyard. He didn't belong in a nice place like this. What on earth was he even going to say or do for that matter? Sure, Endeavor had been the one to invite him over for dinner as thanks for igniting his Shoto's passions and putting him on the path to number one. Shoto even said he was okay with it, Izuku mumbled as he paced a healthy distance across the street from the front door. In truth, he had nothing to worry about. It wasn't like it was a Chaco that had invited him over for dinner or anything. It was just going to be an awkward dinner with Shoto and his father. Why did I say yes? This is so stressful. He wasn't any good at awkward situations, despite how often he found himself in them. What if he said something to embarrass himself? Or make Endeavor mad, or expose All Might's secret by accident, or that he was originally quirkless? Okay, all he had to do was calm down and take deep steady breaths. All Might had said that he should go. Endeavor was influential and an important hero. That's why it was important for him to make an appearance, so that way just maybe he'd get a sponsor or two after him. With his entire body shaking like he was using one for all on his hearty walk to the front door. Deep steady breaths, deep steady breaths. He knocked briefly on the door. Wait, what if there was a doorbell? Or was this even the right door? It was so large there was no way that anybody heard him or. Oh. A female voice called from the other side. One moment. I'll just be a moment. He heard scraping and then the sound of feet running down a long hallway. The door opened to reveal a woman that had to be Shoto's older sister, with snow-white hair sparsely licked by streaks of red, dull blue eyes framed by square glasses. Nobody said anything about having dinner with a beautiful girl. Hello. His face felt warm and his heart was beating faster and faster. It was worse than when a Chaco hugged him. She was Izuku Midoriya. Crud, how could he mess up his own introduction? Oh. The girl looked down at his extended hand. A blush of her own was clearly visible on her pale skin. A hand ran up to her mouth as her eyes locked onto his. Hi, well that is I'm Fuyumi Todoroki, Shoto's older sister. Fuyumi, the name of a goddess that the angels sang about. For what seemed like ages they stood opposite of each other with an uneasy smile on their faces. It was awkward, but it was a good kind of awkward. Actually, there was no good kind of awkwardness, but that did not stop a warm feeling from spreading throughout his body as he failed to maintain eye contact with Fuyumi. Just as much as he was failing, so was she, constantly shifting and squirming and pushing her glasses up. It was too adorable to look at. Are you two just going to stand there all day? Shoto appeared from behind Fuyumi, startling both of them. Sorry, please come in. Fuyumi began to bow. At the same time, Izuku also began to bow. Sorry, may I come in? The sound of coconut bouncing off of coconut echoed throughout the Todoroki family compound as Izuku and Fuyumi collided mid-bow. Ow, sorry. Ow, ow. Fuyumi groaned at the recoil, immediately nursing her growing bruise. Sorry, ow. Sorry. Izuku took a step back, rubbing his own head. He probably did more damage to her, but it still freaking hurt. Shoto stood in the hallway offering them a slow clap that only made things worse. Wow, I'm sure you two will get along great. Anyways, since my sister can't seem to invite you in, welcome to our home, Izuku. Shoto, Fuyumi turned to her brother, one hand still rubbing her forehead. Please be polite to our guests. I am, at least I haven't physically assaulted him yet. Even when he wasn't spouting the flames of Endeavor, Enji Todoroki was a hulking firestorm of a man that seemed ready to incinerate anything that he deemed unworthy. Fortunately for Izuku, Enji's eyes were so focused on the encroaching blizzard that was Shoto. And floating in the middle of the two like a peaceful spring day far away from danger and strife was Fuyumi, who seemed just as nervous and unsure about all this as he was. So, I hope you all enjoy the dinner I made. Fuyumi gestured to the modest spread set out before them. In all honesty, it smelled fantastic, like something that his mom would have made. Our brothers couldn't make it, but please enjoy yourself, Izuku, and welcome to our home. You made this? Izuku looked at the food with even more awe than he had moments ago. With how wealthy Endeavor was, he assumed that he'd have servants or butlers or somebody to cook for him. It looks amazing. He'd yet to actually taste anything, but the smell was filled with the spices of a home-cooked meal. The smell was such that he could get just the faintest taste of the meal by smelling it. Don't let it fool you, Shoto finally stopped glaring at his father long enough to talk to Izuku. Cooking is easy with her quirk. Fuyumi swatted her brother's shoulder. It's not really special, I can just tell the temperatures of things and make small adjustments to them. It's nothing flashy like Dad's or Shoto's. It's proven surprisingly useful for training. Enji grumbled like an active volcano as he began to take great handfuls of the meal like he was a conquering hero setting down for a feast. To say nothing of her cooking. Despite everything about what Shoto had told him about Endeavor, Izuku could have sworn he heard something close to pride in the man's tone. Still, a quirk that could tell temperature of objects, clearly it was visual like Mr. Aizawa's quirk, or perhaps it was touch-based, and she had some of the similar heat immunities that Endeavor and Shoto had, or perhaps it was like some kind of sixth sense that simply allowed her to make those adjustments. What was its range? How much could she heat or cool? Amazing. Is he always like this? Enji grumbled, taking another large bite of food. It was then that Izuku became aware that he had been mumbling about Fuyumi's quirk. Judging by the girl's face, he must have been doing so for quite a while. Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't mean anything by it. Izuku has a habit of overanalyzing quirks. It's useful in a fight and allows him to think up strategies on the fly. Shoto also began to help himself to the food. He easily could have won our fight if he hadn't been trying so hard to help me. I'm aware of that. The volcano in the room was getting ready to explode. You should have been using your fire from the start. It's good that you found a rival that can drive you forward better now than in the heat of battle. Again, was that fatherly concern in Endeavor's voice? As Shoto and Enji argued, Izuku eyed the food set before him and looked across at Fuyumi, who was quick to give him a nod of approval. Just as he was about to reach out and grab some of her food himself, Enji slammed a flaming fist down on the table. And you? The flames vanished as Enji's sudden spike of anger faded. I invited you over here as a thank you for igniting my son's passion and showing him that he can't go through life half-assing things. But there's another reason, and I want some clear answers. Oh no, here it comes. He was going to question him about how he got his quirk. Wait, maybe Endeavor already knew and simply wanted to confirm? But why would he lure him here and not just ask All Might himself? Is All Might your father? How many people were going to ask him that? No, my dad has a job abroad as a spot welder in Alaska. Being able to breathe fire also kind of makes him immune to cold. Oh, so your father could breathe fire then? Enji closed his eyes and tapped his fingers against the table. Then, how do you have All Might's quirk? Father, Fuyumi's voice was like an angel descending from the heavens to save him from the devil. You know that quirks aren't entirely based on genetics, so please stop intimidating our guests. She tried her best to maintain a glare against her father, but only lasted a few seconds before she backed down. I already asked him that, Shoto spoke up, breaking the tension. Izuku even proved to me that his father wasn't All Might when I pressed him about it. The only relation between them is that he's All Might's biggest fan, and their quirks are similar. That seemed to satisfy Endeavor long enough to allow the table to eat in relative peace. Wow, you really are a great cook, Fuyumi. He half mumbled, half whispered, and half yelled at her as his voice seemed to crack with each syllable. It was never this bad with a Chaco. Maybe he was into older women. Oh, thank you. Fuyumi glanced up at him once before she returned her attention to her food. From beneath her hair, she glanced at his plate. With the wave of her hand, the bowl of soup in front of him began to steam again. Your soup was getting cold. Izuku, was it? Endeavor barked before he could so much as enjoy his now perfectly warmed soup. Yes, sir. Before he could even think about it, he was standing up saluting Endeavor. His entire body felt like it was shaking, but not because of fear, no, it was all because of Fuyumi. I want you to continue to be Shoto's rival, even after he becomes the #1 hero. Do I make myself clear? It was like a law of the land had been laid before him, a constitutional proclamation that should he fail to comply, would be his death. Yes, sir, absolutely, sir. Izuku bowed at his waist several times, as fast as he could. Oh, this was bad, this was really bad. I'll do my best, sir. Best not tell him that he also wanted to be the #1 hero. Also, the mighty Endeavor appeared bashful for a split second as he coughed into his hand. I have more resolved cases, the cooler costume, the best hero agency, with the largest reach, and in terms of combat ability, All Might is barely better than me, so what makes you his fan, and not mine? He smiles. The answer just slipped before Izuku could clap his hands over his mouth. Endeavor blinked, clearly not expecting the answer. Oh, I see. Thank you for having me. Izuku bowed deeply, exposing the top of his head. This time Fuyumi waited until after he bowed before she did. She smiled and gave him a small polite bow in return, as her little brother did likewise. Thank you for putting up with our father, oh, and eating my food, and coming over, and helping Shoto, and… What she means to say is thank you. Shoto interrupted her. I'll see you at school, Izuku. Yay. With that, the strange green-haired boy began to run, occasionally turning back to wave at them again and again until he was out of sight. He was so nice and kind too, plus he was strong and able to be blunt to her father, and he liked her cooking. And he liked her quirk. Normally people just thought that she was a walking air conditioner or chef. Fuyumi sighed and leaned against a doorframe and sighed. She wondered when she'd next be able to see him again. You have a crush on him, don't you? Her brother was still standing there, and she was doing the lover leaving pose, and oh god, he knew everything. What are you talking about? He's far too young for me. Fuyumi tried desperately to wave her brother away. Unfortunately, her quirk was temperature control, not weather control. Shoto spun on his heel and walked back to his room. He's only 3 years younger than you, but whatever, I have homework to do. 3 years, huh? That wasn't all that long, but it wasn't like she was going to be seeing him anytime soon, so no need to even worry about him. Best just to go focus on her goal of becoming a teacher. And maybe seeing if Izuku was on Facebook. It had been a week. A week of avoiding Shoto, while at the same time trying to talk to him. A week of staring at her Facebook page, mouse dangling over the friend request button. A week of thinking about all the things he could possibly say to not make it seem like he was desperately awkward. A week of dreaming up first encounters and planning out their life together. A week of her being somewhere in his mind like a constant reminder that she barely even knew he existed. Who in their right mind would be interested in him anyways? He was just some nerdy UA student with a quirk that could level buildings, that happened to lose to her brother, that could cause a second ice age if he put his mind to it. She probably already forgot he existed. I really should get to work on that homework, Izuku mumbled to himself for the 1000th time that night. Despite his thoughts, though, his eyes lingered on Fuyumi's Facebook page. Much of her account was set to private. Being Endeavor's daughter, it was hard to blame her, but she had a wonderful profile picture of her smiling. Maybe she doesn't use Facebook that much? He didn't really use it himself until he went to the UA when Achako and Tenya asked him if he had a Facebook. Now it seemed like he was using it every day to keep in touch with people he saw on a daily basis. And stalking his crush. It was a good thing Facebook didn't keep track of who visited your page, or he'd probably be in Fuyumi's top 10. Izuku? The light knocking on the door, followed immediately by the door creaking open, signaled his mother entering his room. She had a small tray of snacks for him along with some folded clothes. I'm not interrupting your studying, am I? No, Mom. Not that he was doing much studying anyways, just contemplating his own inability to talk to a pretty girl. Maybe he should ask his mom for advice. That sounded like an absolutely horrible idea that would only lead to more emotional scarring. He stood to take the snacks and clothes from his mother and placed them carefully on his bed. At least he'd have clean clothes for school tomorrow. Maybe he'd be able to see Fuyumi at the next sports festival, but then again he didn't see her at the last one. There had to be some way to see her again. Oh? Izuku stiffened. That was the sound that no teenager boy ever wanted to hear their mother make. It was a sound that generations of men feared, as the reveal of an embarrassing secret was about to be revealed. He turned to look at his mother staring at his computer. At Fuyumi's Facebook page. She's cute, Izuku. His mother clapped her hands. Is she your new crush? She's really cute. Danger. Emergency. Mom's embarrassment level reached critical mass. What no? Midoriya scrambled over to his computer, all but pushing his mother out of the way as he went to cover up the screen. I was just curious about Shoto's sister, and I… Click. Time froze. Izuku's eyes slowly drifted towards his hand which had clicked the mouse, then towards the screen. Please no, not like this, please please please. Why did he leave his cursor right above the friend request button? Couldn't you leave it in a less dangerous spot? Next to Fuyumi's smiling profile picture, in a small green box, was friend request sent. Izuku fell to his knees. His social life was over. It was sent. Oh, must be a pretty serious crush. Inko smiled and rubbed her son's shoulders lightly. How on earth could his mother ruin his life and then assure him that everything was going to be okay moments later? 5 tabs of research, 1 tab for music, 1 tab for social media. And 6 tabs for Izuku Midoriya. It wasn't an obsession or anything, she just didn't close a tab until she was done with it. That meant that until she sent Izuku a friend request, she was going to continue to have his profile page as one of her tabs. 2 of the other tabs were for articles about him, including one about his match with her brother. She had seen it on TV, but it was worth rewatching. Even in the middle of a fight, Izuku was the kind of person to try and help his opponent. He put others before himself, a true hero. The other 3 Izuku tabs were those silly Facebook apps that told you who was viewing your page the most. She doubted that they were very accurate, and it was likely just based off of whose pages she had been viewing, which would explain why her father was in her top 10 despite never actually using Facebook. But it still made her feel good that Izuku was at the top of that list. It was her first real crush in a long time. Sure, she had a crush on All Might, but that was something that she'd never tell anybody ever, even under pain of death. She didn't even want to think what her father would do if he found out. She was attracted to muscular men, certainly, something that Izuku fit in a small way. But mostly she had a thing for heroes. It was probably because of her father that she began to find true heroes, those who selflessly help others, so alluring. And Izuku certainly was that. Especially when he charged in against that good monster to save another boy. Though, having a selfless hero as a husband was a great way to end up a widow. Whoa. That's way too far ahead. I don't even know when I'll be able to see him again. When was the next UA school event again? A vibration from her phone sent her eyes towards the Facebook tabs she had opened. Both showed that she had a new notification. Could it be? She held her breath as she clicked on the first tab, revealing her feed. She had a new friend request. Someone knew she existed. Was it Izuku? Please be Izuku. Biting her lip, she clicked on the icon. Her heart skipped a beat. It was Izuku. Izuku had sent her a friend request. He remembered her. This was great, now she could accept his friend's request and then talk to him, which would lead to them going from Facebook friends to real friends, which meant that they would be close, and real friends hung out with each other, allowing her to get closer to him. He'd get a crush on her, and then they'd start hanging out alone, as the line between hanging out slowly begins to blur until all their friends thought that they were actually dating, putting the idea in his head that they should date. He'd ask her, she'd say yes, then they'd kiss and get married and have 2 kids out of love. I'm looking way too far into this. There was no way any of that stuff was even going to happen. He was probably just talking to Shoto and thought that he should be friends with her. Yay, there was absolutely no way that he had a crush on her. That'd be far too convenient. Still, I should wait a little while before I accept, that way he doesn't think I'm on Facebook all the time. Outside of classes and family, it was her only form of social interaction. Click. She accepted. So much for playing it cool, now he's going to think I'm a no-life loser. Fuyumi groaned and placed her head on the desk, pushing her glasses up to her forehead. Even if it was true that she had no real life, that didn't mean she wanted to shout it to everybody. Especially to Izuku. Oh. She shot back up, her glasses falling back into place. I know I'll send him a message that makes it seem like I was doing something and just happened to look at my phone. Oh, look, she accepted your friend request, Izuku. That was fast. Izuku scrambled up his chair to confirm what his mother said. Sure enough, he was now friends with Fuyumi Todoroki, and Facebook was telling him to write something on her wall, and Messenger had opened up, saying they were connected now. Does mother lean in close to the screen and smile? Oh, looks like she's typing something. I'll leave you 2 alone now. Izuku barely heard his mother leave the room as his eyes focused on the chat box. Fuyumi was typing something to him. What was she going to say? What was he going to say back? How did he even talk to a girl? He could barely talk to Achako, Tsuyu, and Momo. Now he was about to talk to Fuyumi. He didn't know how to do small talk. What was he supposed to say? Oh. Izuku pulled out his phone and quickly began to scroll through his contacts. I should, as All Might, he'd know. Wait, did he really want to ask All Might about this? Has All Might ever had a girlfriend? Besides, asking him for advice wouldn't really help. He's so confident he'd probably just say talk to her or be yourself. Or something generic like that. Izuku sighed and looked back towards the chat box. His heart was still beating a million miles per hour. She had stopped typing. Wait, would she stop? Did she think I was somebody else and then realize that I'm actually me and she doesn't remember who I am? No, that's way too lame. There's no way I can say something like that. Fuyumi scratched her head as her delete key got pressed, vigorously erasing the long explanation of how she was studying with friends and was now on the train ride home when he friended her. Oh, and sup? That wasn't cool at all and far too long for a casual text from somebody sitting on the train. He'd see right through it and realize that she was the type of person that was going to end up a crazy cat lady. What should she say? Oh, something simple. 5 keystrokes and enter. Fuyumi, hello. That was it? How could she start off with that? Now she was just a girl whose first word was hello. At least she couldn't stutter while texting. Damn it, Fuyumi, just calm down, he's probably already doing something else. The 3 bouncing dots appeared in the chat box. Izuku was typing. What was he going to say? With her glasses temple tip in her mouth, she stared at the dancing icons. She couldn't really read without her glasses, but chewing their ends soothed her. Finally, Izuku's message appeared. It was short, just as short as hers. Quickly putting on her glasses, she read the text. Izuku, hello. An exclamation point. What did that mean? Was he happy to message her? Was he just excited? Was he annoyed and trying to yell at her? Did he have a crush on her too? How should she respond to that? She just said hello to him, and he said it back. That wasn't any kind of conversation. That was just a greeting. She needed to play it cool. Why didn't her quirk work in social situations? And respond back. Her fingers worked their magic in a blurred motion as letter after letter was placed in the chat box. Fuyumi, I'm happy you enjoyed dinner with my family. What have you been up to? Wait, that was no good. She needed to include something special. Fuyumi, 3. No. I take it back now, he'll really think I'm a crazy cat lady. Fuyumi pulled on her hair, falling backward to stare up at the ceiling. And this is why I never had a boyfriend. Fuyumi? I'm happy you enjoyed dinner with my family. What have you been up to? Fuyumi, 3. What did it mean? What was he supposed to say to that? The smiling face was too adorable as he pictured her trying to make that smiling face at him. It was full of mischief. Did it mean she likes him too? Why were girls so complicated? He needed a translator. Maybe Tsuyu would be willing to? He could probably trust her, hopefully. Izuku, I've just been busy with the UA stuff. We're getting ready for our internships, so I'm excited about that. What about you? Fuyumi, oh, yay, I remember my dad being really excited about Shoto accepting his internship. But what about you? Who's your internship with? Fuyumi is for me. I'm just preparing my thesis for my child development class. This is actually kind of easy. Izuku couldn't help but smile as he continued to chat with Fuyumi. Things were going surprisingly well. The awkwardness of starting the conversation was replaced by a simple need to keep it going. Fortunately, both her and Izuku were filled to the brim with questions about the other. This is great. Spinning up from her desk, Fuyumi danced her way towards the kitchen. She needed something cool to drink if she was going to be chatting with Izuku all night. Her thesis could wait, it wasn't due for another week anyway. She had her love life to think about. Not that I'm in love with him or anything, she laughed while taking a drink from her soda. It was just a crush after all, but crushes could turn into something more, and that something more could turn into love, and love could turn into marriage, and marriage could turn into kids, and kids could turn into a family. And she was getting ahead of herself, wasn't she? If Izuku knew what she was thinking, he'd be scared to death of her. We barely know each other, aside from stalking him on the internet, but that's going to change soon. She mumbled into her can, grabbing a second one for later. Skipping back to her desk, she stopped. 2 messages from Izuku, 2 other notifications, and 3 friend requests. What? Izuku, I am so sorry. Izuku, I didn't know I had that enabled. That wasn't a good sign. Friend requests. Inko Midoriya, Tenyolita, Achako Uraraka. Izuku's mother, and I guess they're classmates? Fuyumi examined their names closely, vaguely recognizing them from her Izuku's friend list. Her brother probably ignored them. Clicking on the notifications, she felt her heart stop. Several people liked her becoming friends with Izuku. Several people also commented on it. Shoto Todoroki, about time. Endeavor, official hero, Shoto. Get back to training. Ichako Uraraka, oh Shoto, you didn't tell us you had a sister. Nice to meet Deku. Tenyu Iida, greetings, Fuyumi. Could you please ask your brother to accept my friend's request so we can properly set up study groups before the next exam? Inko Midoriya, please take good care of my son. Endeavor, official hero, you are Izuku's mother, correct? Inko Midoriya, yes I am, are you Fuyumi's father? Endeavor, official hero, correct. By any chance you didn't happen to sleep with All Might approximately 9 months before your son was born, did you? Fuyumi felt her glasses fall from her face and her shoulders slump. Guess it's time to delete Facebook. Izuku laid his head on the desk, afflicted with a deadly case of supreme embarrassment. Every tick of the clock was a lifetime of itself, only 30 minutes until her class was out. It was 30 minutes that she wasn't responding to Izuku's message. Fuyumi knew that she should be paying attention to her professor's lecture about the learning development of young children and that her phone should be off. Not set to vibrate, let alone glance at it, but it was hard. She kind of had a social life. And Izuku had messaged her. What if he wanted to meet up? Would he really be so bold? What if he was nearby? He was supposed to be going to his mentor today. What if he accepted a mentor? She'd probably see him at some point. He might even have to stay at their home for the duration, which meant that he'd have to bathe in their house, which meant that he'd be naked. Ms. Todoroki? The professor grumbled, pulling at his collar. Sweat was gathering on his glistening bald head that shined constantly thanks to a rather unfortunate quirk. Could you please turn the temperature down just a smidge? The rest of her class was also looking at her in varying degrees of discomfort. Ambient room temperature was 92 degrees. How could she let this happen? The temperature dropped 20 degrees in 10 seconds with no breeze, such was the magic of her quirk. Sorry about that, she mumbled, looking down at her notepad and pretending to scribble down some notes. Extreme emotions often caused her to lose control over her quirk, but bringing the ambient temperature up to 92? That was unheard of. Normally her emotions brought the temperature down. She blamed Izuku's text. The remainder of class flew by as she concentrated on making sure the room didn't melt or freeze. The moment class got out, her hand flew to her phone, where she examined Izuku's message. Izuku, so, I'm off to my mentors for a while, which means I won't be able to chat with you via Facebook. So, if you still want to chat with me, here's my phone number. His phone number? She had a boy's phone number in her phone that wasn't family. Wait, doesn't he have Facebook on his phone? Does he not have a smartphone? Still. His number. This was a huge step forward. So why does it feel like nothing has changed? Izuku was on a train, doing his absolute best not to freak out, which only led him to sweat nervously as he stared out the window watching the city pass in front of him. Sure, he should be nervous about going to meet his mentor who even All Might was afraid of. But Gran Torino was just a small tributary of the mighty river that was his anxiety. What really had him sweating was his own actions. Before he left, he thought to send Fuyumi one last message. He didn't even plan to give her his number, but it just slipped out. Was it too forward? What if she thought he was a creep for giving her his number? What if she ignored him and blocked him forever? What if she thought he was a loser for not having a smartphone? His phone vibrating shocked him out of his thoughts as he fumbled to bring it out. A text message. Please be Fuyumi, please be Fuyumi. Unknown, hi Izuku. I got your message. Thanks for sending me your number. If you want to talk about anything, feel free to message me, and best of luck with your mentor, I'm rooting for you. 3. All of his worries vanished as he read Fuyumi's text, thumbing, and he quickly added her number to his contacts. He had a girl's number in his phone that wasn't his mother's. He didn't even have Chako's number. Just Shoto's, his mother's, All Might's, and Katsuki's. He named the contact Fuyumi 3. Was that too bold? What if she ever saw that? Taking a deep breath, he sighed and stared at the heart after her name. A small declaration of his feelings, even if they were just to himself, was a step forward. Not that I'd ever tell Fuyumi, she's in college, she probably has a boyfriend. She was too pretty and too nice not to have a boyfriend. Izuku, thanks, I have a feeling I'm going to need it. Everybody I've talked to has either no idea who he is or is afraid of him. His phone vibrated seconds later. Fuyumi 3, oh. What's his name? The train came to a stop and more people got off, forcing Izuku to stand as he gave his seat to a woman with a child. Izuku, Gran Torino, apparently he taught All Might. Was that too much information? No, he could trust Fuyumi to not tell everybody about it. Fuyumi 3, better not let my dad know, he's convinced your dad is All Might. Izuku, my mom even sent him a picture of her, and my dad. Izuku couldn't help but smile. All of his concerns about Gran Torino were temporarily pushed to the side as he chatted with Fuyumi. This was a major step forward with their relationship. Fuyumi smiled at Izuku's text as she piled onto the train with the rest of the college students. She used to scoff at them for always having their noses in their phone, but now that she had some form of a social life, she perfectly understood why they stared at their phones smiling like idiots. Deku 3, Gran Torino. Apparently he taught All Might. More stuff connecting Izuku to All Might? Maybe her father was onto something after all. Fuyumi, better not let my dad know. He's convinced your dad is All Might. Deku 3, my mom even sent him a picture of her, and my dad. Fuyumi frowned. Now what? What was she supposed to say to that? Would it be too forward if she complained about not having a photo of him? Would he even send her one? Would that be too creepy? What would he think about the request? Man, this having a crush thing was hard. How did 13-year-olds deal with this stuff? She could barely handle it as an adult. Oh, this might be a good thesis for a paper, the trials and errors of young love. Great, and now I feel like an old lady, Fuyumi mumbled, feeling a wave of despair wash over her. Those 3 years that separated her and Izuku at times felt like a chasm, and other times it felt like nothing. That either spoke volumes of his maturity or her immaturity. Fuyumi, any idea on what you're going to be doing with your mentor? Was that the right thing to ask? From what Shoto had said, it just seemed like they were going to get real experience in a hero agency. That meant fighting villains. What if Izuku got hurt, if not by the villain, but by himself? Whatever his quirk was, it had drastic blowback on his body. It was rare for a quirk to cannibalize the person using it. Even her father, who could reach temperatures that could melt steel, was unaffected, being so close to his own flames. He even wore that stupid flame beard. Shoto, as well, had a natural defense against his quirk. If he used fire and ice, her own quirk wasn't powerful enough to need a way to counteract itself, but she could wear a sweater in the summer and be just fine without using her quirk. Though a lot of quirks were disadvantageous from being overused, the most common symptom was an upset stomach that could be overcome with a bit of practice. But for limbs to be broken from just using the quirk was unheard of. It only made Deku more impressive though, fighting through pain against her brother, all while trying to help Shoto sort out his own problems. He was a real hero, the selfless kind that would charge into trouble for neither fame nor glory. Deku 3, I'm not certain. I hope he's going to be able to help me control my quirk. Fuyumi, do you always go all out when you use your quirk? Couldn't you hold it back a little? Did Izuku have a girlfriend? He was nice, sweet, had a heroic spirit, and was actually pretty cute. No doubt he had girls lining up around the corner to speak with him. She should ask Shoto. Deku 3, actually, I'm only using about 5% of my potential power now. 5%? All those amazing punches she saw him do against Shoto was 5%? What on earth would happen if he used 100%? Would there even be a stadium after that? What about him? What would happen if he went all out? The train came to her stop, and she poured out with the rest of the crowd, still staring at her phone, hoping that Izuku had missed a zero. Izuku stared at his phone as he exited the train, eagerly awaiting Fuyumi's next text. Hopefully she doesn't freak out like his mom did when he told her how much of his power was being held back. Sure, they didn't need to know that he wasn't holding back so much, as he didn't have access to that power, but even he had to admit the thought scared him of what 100% would do, but by that point he'll have figured out how to not hurt himself. Though maybe it would be a good thing if she freaked out. That'd mean that she was at least worried about me, and if she's worried about me she might like. Izuku mumbled. He glanced up at the large train directory. The train he had to get on next was due in about 30 minutes, then he'd practically be at Gran Torino's. He saw her in the corner of his eye and was drawn to her like a moth to the flame. Fuyumi was right there on the other side of the station, tapping on her phone, all but oblivious to the world around her. Her round face was marred by a frown. She looked so cute in her pink sweater, and her normally down hair was done up in a loose ponytail that exposed her neck. His phone vibrated the second she looked up. He looked away from her so fast his head was still spinning by the time he looked at his phone. He kept her barely in his peripheral vision. Did she see him staring at her? How long had he been staring at her? Oh no. Izuku was at this train station too. Was he standing near the directory shaking as he read her latest text message? Had he seen her? If he did see her, why didn't he say anything? Why isn't she saying anything? Damn it, legs move. Despite her best efforts of gathering courage, she put her phone away and stared at the spot where her train would be arriving any minute now. Closing her eyes, she singled out his heat signature. He ran hot compared to the average human. It was only a small fraction of a degree warmer, but still enough to make him stand out to her. His face was especially warm. That couldn't be healthy. Did he have a fever? She should go check on him. Yay, that conversation would go over so well. Oh hey, I noticed that your face was warm while I was stalking you on the train tracks. You wouldn't happen to have a fever, would you? She hadn't seen him yet. That was good. That meant that she hadn't seen him staring at her. Now all he had to do was either ignore her, text her again, or go and actually talk to her. Why did he fear that last one more than he feared standing up to Katsuki? He was a hero, damn it. Talking to a girl should be easy. 1 foot at a time, slowly towards the girl you like. Nothing to worry about. You talk to her every day. You were talking to her just a few minutes ago. You still hadn't responded to her text. It's fine, everything's fine. Hi Fuyumi, he mumbled out, his entire body shaking as he got within walking distance of her. She turned towards him and gave a weak smile. It was hard not to look at her and think that she was the most beautiful woman in the world. She gripped her bag tightly and bit her lip as her cheeks turned ever so slightly pink. Oh, there Izuku, I didn't see you there. Yay, he scratched the back of his head trying really hard not to stare at her. He kept accidentally meeting her eyes. I guess we were in different cars or something. I guess so, I normally take that train here before I transfer to one closer to home, she mumbled looking at her feet. So you're on your way to Gran Torino's? Yay, why was this so much harder than just chatting over Facebook? It was the same thing, just without a keyboard and face to face. Well. The screeching of a train coming into the station drowned out his mumbled words. For a few loud seconds after the train stopped and people flooded into it, they stood motionless. Well, that's my train, Fuyumi shrugged her arm helplessly before she took a step towards the train. She stopped for a second, then before he could react she hugged him. It was warm, comforting, and soft. She smelled like a warm spring day just after a thunderstorm. And left him feeling like he'd been struck by lightning. It was nice seeing you again, Izuku. I'll see you later. She closed her eyes as she ran faster than Tenya into the train, just in time for the doors to close behind her and vanish into the crowd. She hugged him. A girl hugged him. And not just any girl, the girl he liked had hugged him. Nothing was going to ruin this day for him. Nothing. Not even if Gran Torino was a super scary monster that was going to train him until he was on death's bed. Fuyumi felt her heart as she leaned against the doors. It was beating so fast, she couldn't believe that she had done that. She hugged Izuku. Why had she done that? They weren't that close. What if she scared him off? He was always so tense. What if he didn't like people touching him and she just ruined her chance of a relationship with him? Her phone buzzed. Deku 3, thanks for the hug. I'll do my best at the mentorship. She smiled and brought her phone to her heart. I think I'll have to do that again. Hospitals were horrible places filled with germs, sick people, and 1,000 other things that were out to get her. Fuyumi wouldn't say that she was a germaphobe, just that she was very aware of how many sick people were at the hospital. Which is why when her father, in an unusual act of fatherly kindness, asked her to check on Shoto, she arrived at the hospital wearing several layers of sweaters and a surgical mask. Most of her body was covered in some form of fabric, a testament to either her insanity, complete lack of fashion sense, or her missing social graces. Just because her brother was dumb enough to get hurt doesn't mean she was dumb enough to get sick. She had class and at least 2 essays that were due yesterday to work on. A small part of her was equally aware that children were germ factories, but that was a sacrifice she was willing to make. Excuse me, Fuyumi mumbled, placing both arms onto the reception desk, where a nurse was happily ignoring her as she typed on a keyboard. The nurse nearly jumped out of her seat when she saw Fuyumi, which did wonders for her self-confidence, before she calmed down, only rolling back slightly as one hand ducked under the desk while the other pointed down the hall. If you're here to be admitted, the emergency room is that way. What? Did she look sick? She didn't feel sick, and she most certainly couldn't afford to be sick. There was way too much work to do. I'm just here to see my brother, Shoto Todoroki. Oh, the nurse relaxed, dropping both arms between her legs, and her shoulders slumped. Like she had just gotten caught doing something really embarrassing. With the way you look, I just assumed. The nurse stopped talking and looked at the screen, typing in a few keywords. Your brother is on the 4th floor, room 32C. Once you get to the 4th floor, just follow the blue line, and you should find it. Thank you, Fuyumi mumbled, glancing at the elevator and the stairs. Stairs would probably be smarter. Sick people probably didn't want to use the stairs. What did the nurse think she was? Did she look sick? Was it because of the mask? It surely couldn't be because of the sweatpants, sweater, beanie, mittens she was wearing in August. Okay, so maybe she did look ever so slightly homeless, but when she left the hospital completely healthy and germ-free, it would all be worth it. Sticking to the open airways and away from the walls that were a lasagna of germs and disinfectant, Fuyumi half walked, half crept her way to room 32C. An officer stood across from the door, doing his best not to look bored. Why didn't the nurse give her a guest pass or something? Didn't the hospitals do that, or was that just schools? Seriously, here she was looking homeless, wandering around the hospital like an insane person, too afraid to touch the walls. If she had a guest pass, she could just show it to him and waltz on inside. Instead, he was probably going to question her, and it would be awkward because he was a cop, and even though she's the daughter of a hero, she was going to sweat and be nervous. Are you lost? The officer asked her as she began to reach for the door. She totally called it. Reaching into her bag, she dug out her ID. Fortunately, even if her father tended to be an asshole, and even if she was relatively unknown, people at least respected her father's name. I'm Endeavor's daughter, and I'm here to check on my brother. The officer took her ID, checking and then double-checking that it was her, continuously squinting at her eyes and hair color. Honestly, how many people had white and red hair? Seriously, she understood that once quirks started appearing, that traditional understanding of genetics went out the window, but she was still clearly her father's daughter, well, her mother's mostly. With a sigh, she pulled out a strand of her hair, pointing to a patch of red hair that seemed to dance like a flame in the snow. I see, we'll have a nice visit, ma'am. The officer handed her back the ID with an undeserved sense of pride that he did his job. Without so much as a nod, she slipped into the room, forgetting a very important rule about knocking when entering a room. I'm like the hand crusher or something, her brother said, looking down at his hand, frowning. He immediately looked up at her, the first to acknowledge that she had entered the room. Hand crusher? Fuyumi froze as she heard his voice, followed by his genuine laughter. Izuku Midoriya, the 15-year-old soon-to-be hero that was her biggest crush by a long shot. He was wearing a standard hospital robe that left a delicious portion of his chest and neck exposed. Oh, Teeny was there too. Fuyumi? Shoto asked, his voice bringing Izuku's attention towards her. What are you doing here? Panic. Izuku is looking right at her, and she's dressed like an insane homeless lady that owns a bunch of cats. Why on earth is Izuku here? Is he hurt too? Of course, he's hurt. He's in the hospital with bandages on his arms. And why are you dressed like that? Her brother finished, a small half smirk on his face was the closest he had to a smile, added onto it that one raised eyebrow he gave her when she was being ridiculous. Which, as his sister, she got all the time. Dad asked me to check on you. She blurted in a frenzy to remove all of her extra layers, starting with the gloves and beanie. He sounded really unhappy as well. Did something happen? There it was, her brother's true smile. In all its smug self-satisfied glory. I figured he'd be annoyed about taking credit. Credit? She was doing her best to avoid making eye contact with Izuku, who was standing there absolutely rigid, staring at her like she had a quirk that gave her a third head. No amount of germ protection was worth Izuku seeing her like this. Fiddling with the bottom of her sweaters, she singled out her actual clothing for the day. What happened? Shoto nodded towards Izuku, a knowing glint in his eyes that he had all the pieces here and she had just walked into the viper's nest. Izuku, why don't you explain? Izuku, why don't you explain? Huh? Izuku jumped, looking between Shoto and Fuyumi. She looked like an adorable load of laundry, very warm and soft. She was nervously thumbing the bottom of her sweaters, her face flushed with color. What was Shoto talking about again? Oh right. Endeavor being forced to take credit for capturing the hero killer Stain so that they wouldn't get in trouble. Was it really okay for Fuyumi to know about that? Oh well, Izuku began, as Fuyumi huffed, pulling all of her sweaters off at once, exposing her stomach as her shirt clung to the woolen fabric. Rational thought left him as he caught a glimpse of Fuyumi's milky white stomach. There had to be some reason why females were so alluring when their stomachs were exposed due to stretching. Tenyu got in a fight with the hero killer Stain. I showed up to try and save him. I texted Shoto the location, and he showed up too, Together we were able to fight and eventually beat Stain, but we can't take credit or else we'll get in trouble for basically being vigilantes, so your father is going to take credit instead, so that we don't get in trouble." Every word bled into the next as he rambled on without thinking. That was a lie. He was thinking, just all of his thoughts were directed towards one person. Fuyumi. What on earth was he even supposed to say to her? He just blabbed everything that was supposed to be a secret. It was probably all right, he trusted Fuyumi. Oh, Fuyumi blinked at him, bringing a hand to her mouth as soon as her sweaters were off, revealing the black t-shirt with a flaming beard on it. "You're not to hurt, are you? I heard about the hero killer on the news. He seemed dangerous." He was. He had the quirk that allowed him to paralyze people by tasting their blood. I think the duration was based on blood type or the amount of blood he consumed, as he was only able to paralyze me a little bit, but the scariest thing was that he could paralyze people through fear. He was still reluctant to admit it, but he kind of respected Stain's conviction. "It was impressive," Tenya said. His tone was sad, but still full of bravado. His eyes were drawn to his injured hand. "I was foolish, rushing after hero killer Stain on my own, for the sake of revenge, but Izuku and Shadow showed up to save me. They were real heroes and fought to make sure that we wouldn't die." "Really?" Fuyumi squeaked, stepping closer to her heart as she looked between Izuku and Shoto. "Thank goodness you're all still okay then." She moved towards her brother and pulled him into the second most awkward hug he'd seen Shoto receive. The only one greater was when All Might hugged him at the end of the sports festival. He heard her barely whisper, "I'm sure Mom would be proud," into Shoto's ear. The hug lasted for a moment with Shoto sitting there, hands on lap, equal parts awkward and uncomfortable by his sister's affections. "Thank you, Fuyumi." "And you," Fuyumi mumbled, walking in front of him. She paused, biting her lip and grabbing one arm awkwardly. She was barely the same height as him, able to meet his blush face to face. Was that why she was wearing the mask? Was she sick too? Before he could even think, she wrapped him in a surprise hug. Again he was unable to do anything. As she hugged him, it felt like it lasted an eternity, trapped in her wintry warm embrace, like a warm cabin providing shelter from a raging blizzard. "Thank you for helping my brother move forward." Her words were jittery and unstable. He felt a soft wetness press against his cheek moments before she pulled away, smiling at him with a crimson face. Did she just? "Anyways, I gotta go, great job." She all but sprinted out of the room, forgetting her pile of sweaters as she left in a hurry. That settled it, she was sick. Why else would she kiss him on the cheek like that? "Bye, Fuyumi," Izuku mumbled long after she had left the room. His heart was pounding faster than it was facing off against Stain, like he had just activated a full cowl on just his heart, and it was going haywire from all the extra energy. Of all the times to not have his phone with him. "Why didn't I get a hug?" Tenya asked. "You know," Shoto began, a confident smirk on his face as he eyed his sister's sweaters before his eyes settled on Izuku with a smile he didn't quite trust. "If you want, I can arrange for Fuyumi to chaperone us for a trip to the beach during our break." That sounded like an incredibly dangerous and absolutely brilliant idea. Fuyumi was out of the hospital before she even realized it. Her face was so warm, and she was causing the ambient temperature around her to feel more like a desert than Japan in the middle of summer. Where on earth did that boldness come from? Not only was Izuku staring at her as she practically stripped in front of him, but she had kissed him on the cheek? That was too far, wasn't it? That girl Achako had to be his girlfriend because she liked every post on Facebook. She just kissed another girl's boyfriend, and she was supposed to be the responsible adult. Still, she placed a hand over her beating heart and took several deep breaths to cool the air around her. "I want to do it again." The summer sun grinned down upon them with malicious pleasure as its rays baked the sand into a barren wasteland. The only salvation was the salt Loddon ocean air that was a comforting breeze. The beach in the middle of a heat wave was always a crowded place, and today was no exception. "Oh. I think I see a spot over there." Achako bounced, pointing towards an area of beach that wasn't claimed by an umbrella. "Come on, Izuku, let's go." Izuku smiled despite the fact that he was shouldering the lion's share of the group's equipment. He was carrying 2 umbrellas, 3 bags, a plethora of beach towels, and a water cooler. What he didn't carry, Tenya did. "Oh good eye, Achako." Mina Ishido shouted, catching up to Achako with a giant smile on her face. Somehow, the small little beach trip grew dramatically the moment Tenya invited Achako along as well. Not that Achako was to blame, she only told Mina about it, and from there it spread like wildfire until half their class was joining them. As his classmates all walked past him in various states of swimming attire, some like Achako, and himself kept a shirt on, while others like Mina and Yuga were all too happy to have their tiny swimsuits on display. Izuku waited patiently for the main reason he came, Fuyumi. With an overly large sun hat, giant sunglasses, white hoodie, floral skirt, large book, and notepad, it hardly looked like she had any intent on joining them for standard beach fun. But to Izuku it was nearly impossible to keep his eyes off of her, even as her skin was extra pale thanks to the generous amount of sunscreen she had placed on. She stumbled slightly when she reached the hot sand, grabbing onto his shoulder to steady herself. Grabbing her foot and placing more of her weight on Deku, she adjusted her sandal, which had gotten a rock or something in it. "Thanks for waiting, Izuku." She paused to consider him for a moment before she took a quick step back, her face hidden by her wide-brimmed hat. "Are you okay holding all that?" "Yay, this is nothing." To demonstrate his point, he lifted the ice chest well above his head like he was doing a power lift and squatted with it twice. Very impressed by Izuku, Fuyumi laughed at his display, a sound as good as any praise from All Might. As soon as her laughter died down, however, the awkwardness began to set in. What now? He just made the girl he likes to laugh? Was he supposed to make her laugh again? He didn't know any jokes. Knock knock. Who's there? Not funny. Not funny who? Not funny Deku. It's hard to believe that 2 years ago this beach was nothing but a dump. Fuyumi took a step forward, waiting for him to fall in stride beside her. That's when it hit Izuku, he knew this beach. He had spent so much time on this beach training, following All Might's American dream plan. It looked so different when every muscle in his body wasn't yelling at him. Seeing it so lively brought a sense of pride to his step as he walked beside Fuyumi. But could he really just claim that he did all this? Would she even believe him? Was that just showing off? Did she not like people that showboating? Her father was Endeavor, she might be sick of people proclaiming their deeds. But at the same time he did really do it. I helped out a bit, oh god, he was bragging. This felt so wrong. All Might had me do it as part of my training. So now All Might trained you? Fuyumi nudged his elbow with her own, a soft smile on her face. The connection between you certainly is strong. Darn it. How come he was so loose with information around her? Next thing he was just going to blab that his quirk wasn't just similar to All Might's, it literally was All Might's. Still, Fuyumi half-hummed as they passed a tall lanky boy trying to keep 2 lobsters out of reach of a short tree deed. It is impressive work and great community service. You did a great job here, Izuku. On behalf of all the beachgoers, thank you. Thank you. It came out far more squeaky than he would have liked it to. Fuyumi believed him, she didn't even question it at all. Sure, it was the truth and everything, but it still meant something to him at any rate. And she was impressed by him. Wait, why did he say thank you? She thanked him, shouldn't he be saying you're welcome? Izuku. Tenyu brought him back to reality, their spot already staked out with clearly defined marks of where everything should be placed. Excellent, you're here, place the blankets here, and the umbrella here, and… A soda resting at her side remained at the perfect temperature, despite what most people would think temperature had a lot to do with how a soda tasted and felt. The carbonation died down if the soda got too cold, and the syrup turned into a sticky mess if it got too hot. But thanks to her quirk, she had discovered the perfect temperature for optimum taste. The schoolwork she had brought along was completely forgotten, well, not so much completely forgotten. The plans that she had to work on it was as she watched her brother and his classmates have fun. What am I even doing here? She took a sip of the soda, the vague notion that she would have preferred it to be a beer lingered in the back of her mind. Apparently, beer tasted drastically different based on its temperature. And if her life continued on its current path of getting a crush once every 10 years with someone that couldn't possibly have any interest in her, then she was going to have plenty of time to experiment with alcohol. Shame she had absolutely no social skills. Being a bartender might have been a good way for her to earn spare cash. That, and she couldn't stay up past 11 worth a damn. I'm only 18, and I'm a bitter old lady. And she had good reason to be, as well. Izuku didn't have a girlfriend. He had many girlfriends. Sure, the Achako girl was in the lead and was easily the cutest, with a wonderful personality that was hard to dislike. But that wasn't her only rival. The frog girl also was smart enough to realize that Izuku was a catch and was on good terms with Izuku. The pink girl was the kind of uber-friendly person that Fuyumi often wished she was. Stupid Izuku, she mumbled, half glaring at him as she openly admired his toned hero's body. Why couldn't he have some mind-reading quirk that allowed him to realize other people's feelings about him? Wait, no, that would be bad. Then he'd realize all those other girls had feelings for him too, if he hadn't already. What would be really great is if somebody had a quirk to turn any liquid into beer. That'd be a true hero. Sighing, she fell back down onto her towel of self-pity. This was all Shoto's fault. He had said it was just going to be him, that Tenya person, and Izuku. Not half a class of teenagers. Sure, she was aiming to become a school teacher at some point, but there was a difference between the classroom and the beach. And she was not going to develop a crush on her students. Fuyumi? Oh god, it was Izuku. He snuck up on her. Why don't you come join us? She snapped up to a sitting position to see Izuku glistening in the sunlight like he was a vampire from Twilight. Being wet did absolute wonders to his body, showing off every detail of his well-formed chest. It was part of the reason why she believed that he had removed all the trash from the beach. Those muscles came from one place only. Hard work and determination. Oh. She snapped out of her admiration, frantically waving her hands in front of her as though to make a wall of force. No, I couldn't, they're your friends, not mine. Besides, that meant going into the water, which meant that she'd have to be in her bathing suit, and she was so not willing to let Izuku see her like that. She wasn't a hero. She didn't train, she sat on her butt eating chips while she did homework. Okay, Izuku said, reaching down into the cooler. She let out a sigh of relief, or was it disappointment, and then he sat down beside her. Panic mode began to set in. He was so close. Their shoulders were too close. If she really wanted, she could lean over and kiss him. Well, she did really want to. It was just so terribly awkward, and there was no way that she could ever gather the courage to kiss him, especially on the beach when he was shirtless and looking like a cover model of Teen Hero magazine. She stared at her own drink, taking another sip of the can she already knew was empty. They entered another familiar awkwardness that seemed to define her relationship with Izuku. It was uncomfortable by any means. But she just wished that it was filled with something more than silence. Against her will, her hand inched its way across the giant plus ultra beach towel they were sitting on. Its goal was obvious, Izuku's own hand that was resting oh so close. What would she do if she grabbed his hand? That wasn't something friends did. She was going to grab his hand, she'd have to confess that she liked him, and then she'd get rejected. What time did the animal shelter close today? She was going to need at least 3 cats. Why on earth couldn't some giant monster appear and save her from this self-inflicted embarrassment, and then force Izuku to save her, only for his heroic actions to set them adrift at sea, where she'd have to nurse his leg back to health and slowly open his heart up to her, where they ultimately decided to remain on the island and happily live together, cut off from the outside world. Oh, right, he was a hero, and she was practically plugged into the internet. Her hand was just about to grab his, a snake closing in on its prey. Giant monster any moment now. Hey babe, Fuyumi retracted her hand and saw a large man, larger than her father, with bulging muscles in a mankini. His skin was an even cooked lobster red, instead of hair a wildfire danced on his head. But to Fuyumi, his most shocking feature was that his body temperature was 80 degrees Celsius, 176 degrees Fahrenheit, nearly twice that of a normal human. Name's Hothead. He flexed his admittedly impressive muscles, showing off his repulsive personality. His name was Hothead? More like Meathead. From the flaming hair to the way he walked and talked like he owned the beach, he was far too like her own father. The exact kind of person she was not attracted to. But you can call me Kato. He slammed down on the blanket next to her, one hand holding his head while the other rested on his hip, as though to tempt her into liking him. You're Endeavor's daughter, right? Fuyumi kept her mouth shut, doing her best to ignore the unwanted attention. Besides, he said Abe, he was clearly talking about somebody else. Maybe if she just ignored him, he'd leave and never come back. His hand brushed against her cheek, pushing aside her hair and making her scoot away from him quickly. Heh, looks like they were right, you are immune to hot temperatures. What do you say to me and you go somewhere private and explore how compatible our quirks are? Any pity she should have felt about his quirk forcing his body to literally be too hot to touch was forfeit thanks to his abysmal personality. Sure, his skin was hot enough to burn other people, but that gave him absolutely no right to touch her. No thank you, she mumbled, gripping the towel tightly. Eyes focused on the horizon, prayed that he would leave her alone. Aw come on baby, you should be flattered, an average-looking chick like you being able to get with a hunk like me. He grabbed her arm tightly, his voice going from smarmy and sweet to tough and threatening. Kato stood up, pulling her up with him. Now let's. She doesn't want to go with you, Izuku said just loud enough to finally appear on Kato's radar. Fuyumi swallowed as she looked at Izuku, his face was calm before the storm, even as his hand was tightened into a shaking rage. Let her go. His voice made her heart skip a beat, it was filled with fury and rage. Yay, and what are you going to do about it? Kato tried to shove Izuku away, but despite his muscles and size advantage, he was unable to so much as make Izuku flinch. I'd rather not fight you, Izuku took another low steady breath, betraying the rage hidden behind his voice. She could see it in his eyes, they danced like the ocean at storm. So just let her go and leave us alone. PFFT, no way punk, let's see you keep talking after I fry your noggin. Kato shoved Fuyumi to the ground and balled his hand into a giant meaty fist, growing hotter and hotter with each passing second until the air around the fist exploded in fire. He then punched Izuku. Or at least tried to. The haymaker was slow and obvious. And if Izuku was anything, he was quick. He dodged to the inside, grabbing Hothead's arm and then threw him out into the ocean, where he skipped off the water several times before landing with a splash. Fuyumi looked at him wide-eyed, she was fairly certain that her crush had just leveled up. Are you okay? Izuku asked her to offer her a hand, she took it readily, noticing the burn marks on both his hands. Sorry it took so long, I wasn't sure if he was your boyfriend or not. She ignored that and pulled Izuku into a tight hug. He might be a hero in training, he might become a professional hero, but right now he was her hero. Thank you so much, Izuku. She felt tears begin to stream down her eyes as relief flooded over her as Izuku returned. Her huge determination set in. She was going to make an effort. She was not going to let Izuku leave her life without kicking and screaming about it. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Fuyumi's hands were soft and their coldness was wonderful, soothing his burned hand as she wrapped them in bandages and ointment. It didn't hurt that much, at least not compared to the pain he got when breaking his bones to use one for all. Hey Izuku, Fuyumi mumbled as she stared at his hands, making certain that they were bandaged properly. I was wondering. She took a moment to gather her thoughts and sighed, still holding his hands. I want to hang out with you again. That sounded like a good idea. Just the two of us? Her face was red as she spoke, and it sounded like a question. Was she asking him on a date? What should he say? Well, yes duh. This was Fuyumi, and she was asking him out. There was no doubt that he was going to say yes. As friends? She squeaked, letting go of his hands as her face turned red. Oh, she probably realized it sounded like a date and changed her mind. Still, yay, I'd love to. Free time was an increasingly foreign concept to Fuyumi as her college classes picked up, add to that her part-time job as a teacher's assistant, and she barely had enough time to make sure that she wasn't losing her mind. It was during this time that Izuku's messages became a shining highlight in her nights. Her phone had become her heartbeat, she was never far from it, nor was it allowed to ever lose power. She invested in several charge packs to prevent it from happening. It was pathetic really, how her best friend was some boy she only really spent maybe a total of 10 hours with in person. Fuyumi sighed, tapping her pen against her head, a pile of homework lay half done in front of her. A soft smile formed on her face as her mind wandered to its favorite place. Izuku, more specifically Izuku in her life, as something more than her best friend. Years down the line, she would be teaching her class, young students, maybe 4th or 5th grade. Her students would be talking about how their sensei was the great Deku's girlfriend. Talk she tried to discourage, but only because she had to. Izuku would be a young up-and-coming hero. He wasn't the #1 hero, but he was making waves, and there were rumors spreading that he was going to be the next #1 hero soon enough. An event that was talked about frequently when they were both home in mutual excitement. It would be during a lecture, maths probably, maybe history. Izuku would show up in his hero garb, holding a bouquet of flowers. He'd sneak in, motioning for the children to keep quiet, which would ultimately fail. She'd spin around and gasp in surprise as he held out her favorite flowers, made all the more lovely by his handsome smile. Then she'd notice something on the flowers, something shiny and glittering. A ring. He'd get down on one knee, her students oohing and awing, she could practically hear his words. Fuyumi, will you marry me? Why yes, Izuku, I'd love to marry you, Fuyumi mumbled into her pen, a bit of drool escaping from her mouth. Grown-up Izuku was going to be such a cutie. Even now she wanted to reach out and touch him. His hands looked so warm and strong, even his scars looked cute. She wanted to spend a night just running her fingers along those scars, watching to see if he'd shiver at her touch. Sadly, we haven't even hung out since that beach trip, Fuyumi groaned, collapsing onto her book to let out yet another sigh of melancholy. Damn it, why couldn't she just be honest and tell Izuku that she thought about him more than she thought about food? Okay, maybe not use that exact line, but he was still on her mind a lot. A perfectly healthy amount, honestly, probably. That's it. I'm going to text him how I feel. Scrambling onto the floor, Fuyumi dove towards her phone, where it was just far enough away to allow her to focus on homework. It opened up to the last place she left it, chat with Izuku, and her fingers went to work. Izuku, I know this is weird, we hardly ever actually hang out in person, but I think I like you as something more than a friend. You're smart, kind, and really cute, so please let me know if I have a chance with you. Reading it back, it sounded good. All she had to do was press send and then delete. Her finger slammed down on the delete button 216 times to remove every character from the world. No, there's no way I could do that. Who the heck confesses over Facebook? No life losers who treated Facebook as their only portal out into the world was who. A demographic that Fuyumi was in denial about being a part of. She was a busy college student, she had an excuse, and just the other day she politely declined several requests to hang out with her peers. She had a social life. It was just starving because it only wanted to have Izuku. Fuyumi groaned, spreading out to take up as much room on her floor as possible. Damn it, Izuku, I know I said I was studying, but that doesn't mean you have to leave me alone. Wow, her brother said loud enough to make her jump. Shoto stood in the doorway holding 2 cups of tea. He was leaning against a doorframe, looking like he'd been there for a while. I knew you had a crush, but this is something else. How much did you see? From her spot on the ground, Fuyumi glared up at her brother. There was a time when Photo was actually afraid of her, when he was a cute little 4-year-old, but now it was like a mouse trying to scare a lion. Shoto took a victorious sip of his tea, extending 1 cup out to her. About the time you accepted Izuku's proposal. And you didn't say anything? Despite her whining, Fuyumi accepted her brother's peace offering. The tea was bitter, without any trace of sugar or honey, just straight tea. Just how Shoto liked it, and how she hated it. Bleh. It didn't stop her from taking another sip. You really should just tell him, Shoto mumbled into his own tea as he exited her room. You should probably hurry, we'll be going on a training trip soon, and I heard there won't be cell service out there. I know that already, Fuyumi shouted at her brother's back. Ever since Izuku knocked some sense into her broth, he had become a much warmer person in more ways than one. The only downside to this was that he also became a bit of a troll when it came to just about every aspect of her life. It didn't make him any less wrong. She sighed and took another bitter sip of her tea. He was probably right about Izuku, she really should just be honest with him. A rejection was no worse than all the suffering she was going through right now. Plus, if he accepted, or even returned her feelings, then they could maybe possibly actually go on a date, or something like awkwardly sitting next to each other on the couch while they watched Netflix, or going to the library to study together. But nothing would happen if she didn't do anything. I know that already, she mumbled into her tea. Her phone was mocking her with the idle chat log she had with Izuku. As difficult as it was to muster the courage to text Fuyumi, it was twice as hard not to message her. Talking to her was an addiction, and browsing her Facebook was something of a guilty pleasure of his. He'd already liked every single thing she'd posted since she first friended him. I wonder if she's done studying now? Izuku mumbled, balancing his pencil between his lip and nose. He was rather productive when he was trying not to talk to Fuyumi, already packed for the training camp, finished some upgraded designs of his suit, and was now finishing the homework due after the training camp. Leaving him with, well, nothing to do but fret about his relationship with Fuyumi, or more specifically the lack thereof. She had asked him to hang out alone at some point, but had yet to invite him out. How on earth is he even supposed to bring that up? Oh hey, remember that time you said you wanted to hang out alone? When are we going to do that? His phone vibrated extra furiously. It wasn't a soft 3 buzzes that he set for Fuyumi. No, this was an angry vibration that sounded like a demon was trying to escape his phone and strangle him. There was only one person that could make his phone vibrate like that. Katsuki Bakugo. He didn't even said it, it was like his phone knew that it was Katsuki texting him. His phone vibrated again, nearly jumping out of his hand. Ka-chan, and I'm not talking about Gravity Girl, keep seeing you liking her shit on Facebook like you're some kind of fucking loser stalker. Grow a pair of balls. Ka-chan, cunt. Was it so obvious that somebody like Ka-chan was annoyed by it? Well, he was actually annoyed by just about everything. So it was probably just Ka-chan being weird, hopefully. His phone buzzed again, normally this time, not channeling Katsuki's anger, another text message. This one from Shoto. Shoto, do you like my sister? Izuku stared at his phone, feeling the world sink beneath his feet. Now Shoto was asking if he liked Fuyumi? That was bad, that was really bad. If he said no, then Shoto would probably tell Fuyumi, or maybe not, and then nothing will change. But if he did tell Fuyumi, because Fuyumi liked him, then she would stop liking him and probably stop talking to him. But if he said yes, that he did like Fuyumi, then Shoto might be willing to help him, or he'd tell Fuyumi, and then Fuyumi would laugh at him, because there's no way that she would like somebody as young and childish as him. But maybe she did like him too, and she was just too nervous, and Shoto was trying to be a good brother and a good friend by setting them up. The 3 letters he typed were agonizingly slow. Izuku, yes. Shoto, thought so. Seconds turned to minutes, minutes turned to an hour. And that was all Shoto said. No text from Fuyumi either, nothing, just a sound of him slowly losing his mind. What on earth was happening over there? Did Shoto say something? Was Fuyumi laughing? Or maybe she was just so mortified that she couldn't even bear to text him. Maybe she was just finding a nice way to reject him? Yay, that had to be it. Fuyumi glared at her homework, as though its completion would be hastened by her ire. This was not the time for homework. She should be trying to figure out how to tell Izuku how she felt. It was the only way for their relationship to even have a small chance of happening. A snowball's chance in hell, but she could control the temperature so that Snowball had a damn good chance. How on earth can a teenage girl be expected to focus on academics at a time like this? Sure, she was officially considered an adult, but when it came to relationships, she had the maturity of a 13-year-old just realizing that boys weren't super duper icky. But how on earth was she supposed to tell him? Texting him that she liked him was just so lame. It's just too impersonal. Still, if Izuku texted me that he liked me, I'd probably be really happy. Fuyumi fell back onto the ground, staring up at the ceiling, trying to take up as much room as possible. Her brother was standing in her doorway brushing his teeth, a smug smile on his face. What now, Shoto? Izuku likes you. With those words, her brother slid the door shut, still scrubbing his teeth. Fuyumi blinked. Did she hear her brother right? Did Izuku like her? How did he know? Did Izuku tell him? Did he ask for permission? Oh god, what if he asked her father for permission as well? Or was her brother just playing a trick on her? No, Shoto wouldn't do that. If he said that Izuku liked her, then Izuku liked her. She had to tell him that she did too. Scrambling to her phone, Fuyumi texted the words she had been wanting to say for months now. Fuyumi, I like you. The second she hit, her phone vibrated. Deku 3, I like you. Izuku stared at his unmoving phone while his heart beat violently against his chest. As much as he hated to admit it, Ka-chan was right. He needed to tell her, he needed to be the one to tell her before Shoto or anybody else could do it. He grabbed his phone and began to text. The words I like you sat on his phone for what seemed like ever. His finger froze above the send button. His thumb is unable to move. Then his phone vibrated, once, twice, 3 times. On the second vibration, his finger pressed the send button, sealing his fate. But more importantly, Fuyumi had messaged him. Fuyumi 3. I like you. Izuku, I like you. It was hard to imagine ever being happier than he was right now. She was late. 6 months of running around and trying to scrounge up enough free time that they could spend just one night together, and she was late. There was no excuse, there was no reason for it that could possibly justify her running late. The simple fact of that matter was that she was late. Fuyumi half ran half stumbled to their meeting place, a mall that was more or less the halfway point for both of them, trying to keep her sundress that fit perfectly 3 months ago from falling down. She blamed school stress for the 10 pounds she lost. By the time she reached the fountain where Izuku had suggested they meet, her feet were killing her. Not good for a walk-around date. But for a date with Izuku, she could bear through it. The thought of that made her heartbeat quicken and her face feel flush. Somehow their relationship hadn't just survived being a text-based adventure, it had thrived. More than one night had been spent texting sweet nothings to each other, or, as was becoming more common, phone calls where they could just talk for hours while they worked. She loved it when he talked to her while he was working out. Green hair, green hair? Fuyumi surveyed the crowd. Looking for Izuku's signature hair color, it should be easy to spot him out in a crowd, just like finding her or her brother would be easy. At least if uncommon and unique hair colors weren't becoming more and more common. However, there wasn't a single green hair to be seen. Relief filled Fuyumi. Good, Izuku was late too. That meant that he wouldn't know that she was late. But why was he late? Did something happen? Did he decide that he didn't want to date her? Did that Achako girl finally make her move? Did he get into a fight? He was a hero, after all, it was bound to happen, and Deku had the heroic trait of constantly meddling in everything. And a habit of getting in over his head, over and over again, making her worry only for him to somehow come out on top. Maybe I should text him? Her phone felt heavy in her hands like it was made by lead. Or maybe he texted her. Her fingers flicked at the phone faster than she thought possible. No new message from Izuku, since he said he was on his way. Would it be too much to message him and ask him where he was? Wait, maybe this was a good thing? That way he wouldn't see how thin she'd become and freak out that she was now a hideous monster. Wait, no. That wasn't it. She needed to see Izuku, it had been so long. Besides, he liked her, they said so frequently. They had so many promises, so many dates backed up for when they both graduated, he a full-fledged hero and symbol of peace, her a teacher. Fuyumi, I'm at the fountain, where are you? A vibration followed by a squeak from behind the fountain got her attention. It couldn't be related, could it? It happened as soon as she sent the text. And it was a squeak that sounded vaguely familiar. Biting her lip, Fuyumi walked around the fountain and saw a man squatting behind it. His right hand was scared, and a tuft of green hair peeked out from the oversized sweater he was wearing. Despite the loose fit of his clothes and the diminishing effect of his pose, evidence of his impressive physique was apparent. Dude was cut. And it was Izuku. Izuku? What are you doing down there? She might have been mad that she dressed up for this date and he was in comfy pants and a sweater like he just came from the gym. But then he stood, getting taller, and holy crap, he was tall. He grew like a green bean in 6 months. Gone was him being adorable and barely taller than her to him all, but towering over her. With his good hand, Izuku took off his hood, his face flushed with color from ear to ear. He had matured, he had grown up, he had gone from adorable to hot. And not just hot, like the kind of hot that you need to tell somebody about. I'm sorry, Fuyumi, it's just that when I saw you, I got nervous because you were so beautiful. She almost heard none of his stutterings as he mumbled his way through that. Fuyumi didn't know what to think. Here, standing in front of her, was the boy that she had spent the last half a year practically dating over the phone, standing in front of her as an absolutely gorgeous man. And he thought that she was so beautiful that he was nervous about it. What should she do? She wanted to touch him. Her hand shot out towards him like a businessman expected a handshake. Take my hand. It was barely a whisper. Huh? Izuku stared at her hand, his own twitching in anticipation. Oh God, he was so attractive and so nervous. Those two things didn't add or multiply his hotness, no, they were an exponential function. She might be taking one to many maths classes of hotness. And the fact that he is such a sweetheart? Take my hand, please, she mumbled slightly louder this time. Her eyes were staring at her feet. I don't think my legs can move on their own right now. Why? Are you okay? Did you hurt yourself? He took 2 steps closer, that adorable panic mode almost set in. Fuyumi smiled and shook her head, causing her long hair to tickle her back. No, I'm just so happy you said that I don't think I can move on my own right now. Oh, Izuku stared at her hand for a second before he took it on his own. He was so strong, yet so gentle despite the calluses on his hand. The texture was enough to send shivers up her spine. Let me know if I'm holding it too tight, okay? You're fine, now where to go first? Please say it was to get a new phone with a camera. She wanted selfies of Izuku while he was working out. He was basically her boyfriend. There was nothing shameful about wanting that, right? Wait, boyfriend? This was their first actual real date in flesh and blood. They weren't at that stage, right? How did relationships work? Izuku smiled and pulled her forward. Well, Suya recommended this great ice cream place, and after that we can go to a store Momo told me about, and Kyoka mentioned there was a cool karaoke bar next to a BBQ grill that's supposed to be really good, and then if we have time there's a theater that Toru told me about. Aside from the fact that all of those spots were recommendations from girls in his class and thus potential rivals for Izuku's affection and they got to see him more than she did, it sounded like a perfect date. I look forward to it. He squeezed just the slightest bit tighter around her hand and he gave a nervous laugh. Yay, I just hope nothing goes wrong. I'm just as nervous as you are, Izuku. She took a step closer to him, so they walked side by side, their arms touching every so often as they walked. I'm sure everything will be fantastic. He sighed. Why did he sound so sad? Izuku, what's wrong? You know you can tell me anything. At least she hoped so. Well, I guess you can text me anything. They shared a small laugh at their combined social failings, and then a suffocating awkwardness set in. It wasn't just any kind of awkwardness, it was the quiet awkwardness that floods in after a bad self-deprecating joke that swallows up all hope of having a normal conversation. So, we're here. Izuku smiled and pulled her arms closer as he pointed at the ice cream shop. It wasn't one of the larger chain stores that were so common in the malls, or if it was, it wasn't a name Fuyumi recognized. The chill of ice cream did nothing for her most of the time, but the sweetness and texture were good. But the name made her snort. Cowlicks? Fuyumi laughed, reaching up to flick one of Izuku's cowlicks, though it couldn't really be called a cowlick if his entire hair was a giant mess of them. It was so silky smooth. Don't you have enough of those? Hey, he whined, I thought you said you liked my hair. I did, and I do. Once seated, Fuyumi watched eagerly as Izuku brought them their ice cream. So what did you get? She accepted her double scoop of strawberry and mint ice cream that seemed to blend pink and green into a delicious-looking swirl of bright colors. Izuku presented her with what looked like a cup of slightly gray and chunky vanilla. Mushroom ice cream. Mushrooms? They make mushroom ice cream? She was not a fan of fungus of any form, in stir-fry, pizza, on burgers, in ramen. It was all just gross and made her skin crawl. She knew some people might like it and that she was just being picky, but it was a fungus. Yay, it's actually super good. He said with the spoon hanging out of his mouth. Without thinking, he stuck his spoon back in and presented her with a small bite. Here, give it a shot, I'm sure you'll like it. On the one hand, mushrooms. On the other hand, an indirect kiss with Izuku. That wasn't even close to being even. She leaned in and gobbled up the frozen fungus treat. And was pleasantly surprised. It was sweeter than vanilla with a bit of the bitterness of chocolate. But the flavor was altogether not something she would have associated mushrooms with. Wow, that's super good. Remind me to get that next time. They weren't even done with the first date, and she already wanted to go on so many more with Izuku. The rational part of her mind was telling her to keep it cool, that first loves are almost never the last or only love. But her beating heart was turning up the heat. It felt so right, being able to talk with Izuku like this, even though the awkwardness and the silence, just being around him made her feel safe and happy. And they still had so much data left after this. Oh, hey, let's take a picture together. Fuyumi grabbed out her phone and held it up and away from them. She leaned into the center of the table holding her spoon like she was one of those anime girls. Izuku quickly mimicked her, giving the peace sign with a great big smile. The photo was perfect, a perfect reminder for a perfect day. Here, take a look. The world shook. Her ears were ringing, and the side of her body hurt. Lights danced in her eyes, but one thing was certain, Izuku was holding her. Fuyumi? Fuyumi? Are you alright? Izuku asked. His face was haggard, and a bit of blood dripped from his face. Please say something, please. Her mouth felt dry. What happened? Why was she on the ground? Why were her ears ringing? She blinked and looked towards the shop. It was in ruins, the store across from them a smoldering mess of wreckage. There was an attack? A villain? A second explosion further away this time. She looked at Izuku. He wasn't looking at her either. He was biting his lip and shaking, ready to leap into action as soon as she said that she was okay. There was that heroic nature she adored. I'm fine, now go help them. He eased her down before he ran off into the heat of battle. The back of his hoodie was torn and blood poured from his shoulder. She heard him shouting, directing the panicking civilians and redirecting the rescue efforts. She was the daughter of Endeavor, she should probably help. She couldn't fight, but she could. She could do something. Standing was more difficult than she thought, her ankle was sprained or twisted. More shouting came from outside, followed by a shockwave that knocked her off her feet. Izuku flew past her a moment later, crashing into another building before he flew through the air back the way he came, his body radiating some kind of power. That must have been his full cowl. Standing again, Fuyumi forced herself forward, ignoring the pain in her ankle. If there was something she could do, then she needed to do it, whatever that was. Most of the people had fled by then, and more, a few were helping others out of the rubble. But her eyes were glued to Izuku, who was facing off against a gray-haired man with his hands in his pockets. The man didn't look like he had so much as been touched, while Izuku was looking worse, like he'd been fighting for an hour. It was clear that Izuku wasn't going to win this fight. Not if he didn't think of something. Her feet moved her forward, even as the man flicked his wrist and sent Izuku backward. Haha, is that all you got? If that's it, then there's nothing you can do to stop somebody like me. All the heroes in this country are so pathetic. The man laughed, sounding much younger than she thought he was. Izuku said nothing, carefully reading and studying his opponent's moves. Fuyumi's feet didn't listen to pain or reason and pressed forward towards the danger and towards Izuku. Oh, and who do we have here? The gray-haired villain turned towards her, a sinister smile on his face. Another worthless hero? Izuku turned to her, shocked and worried. Fuyumi, run. His quirk lets him create and redirect force. Oh, you're a smart one, aren't you? He took a step closer to Izuku, a menacing aura fluttering around him. You were able to figure all that out from just our little spat, weren't you? But you're not entirely right. You see, I can control vectors, which means I can control everything. Fuyumi frowned. That was a problematic quirk. In theory, everything had not just one vector, but multiple vectors. When Izuku went to deliver a powerful punch, he could redirect all that force and power back and away from him. Fuyumi, run please. Izuku begged her, but her legs were glued to where they stood. Oh, such wonderful please. A sick and twisted grin grew on the man's face. As he took a step towards Izuku. Have you ever wondered what would happen if all of the blood in your body suddenly stopped? Or if it went 1,000 times faster? Or what if I made it so that your blood decided to leave your body all at once? I wonder what kind of mess you'd make. He appeared right in front of Izuku, almost touching him. All I have to do is just touch your blood and then decide how to make you pop. She had to do something. Izuku was going to die. She had to stop him. There had to be something she could do to stop him. Fuyumi's mind raced faster and faster as the man's hand slowly began to touch Izuku's blood. Stop. 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 She screamed, feeling her quirk surge from inside of her. 37 degrees Celsius was the temperature of the human body. 2 degrees colder. At 35 degrees the body begins to enter hypothermia. At 32 the heart rate begins to slow, confusion sets in, and vision begins to fade. 32 degrees the body loses its ability to move and blood pressure becomes low enough to force a coma. 22 degrees was when the heart stopped. 15 degrees was all that separated people from death. -2 degrees centigrade blood freezes, -27 degrees centigrade the human body becomes like glass and shatters. 60 degrees, in the time between seconds. The man stood there, a statue of ice, his body flash frozen, as frost began to build on him. The arm so close to Izuku snapped under its own weight and fell to the ground where it shattered. Fuyumi blinked, her head was pounding, her body felt so hot and so cold at once. The edge of her vision blurred and her ears were ringing. Her nose felt wet and she tasted iron. She touched her nose, it was wet, but the feeling in her limbs was quickly fading. Blood, she had blood on her fingers. As the world faded to black, the last thing she saw was Izuku running towards her. Fuyumi's eyes fluttered open, she was in a hospital room, her body hurt, and her head was still spinning. What happened to Izuku? The mole? The man? Her mind pounded at her as clarity poured into her mind. Her stomach twisted with realization. She had killed somebody with her quirk. She could flash freeze a person. The thought of ever doing it again made her sick. Izuku, she groaned. What happened to him? Was she too late? Did she save him? Fuyumi. A hand squeezed hers tighter, and she saw Izuku dressed in a hospital gown sitting right next to her. He looked ragged. You're okay. I've been so worried about you. What about you? Are you okay? Fuyumi struggled to sit up, and Izuku was more than willing to help. I'm fine, no worse than I normally get, but I'm so sorry this happened to you. I never should have asked you out, this is all my fault. He mumbled as he placed a pillow behind her. I'm just happy that you're okay now. Izuku, look at me. He was already looking at her. I'm really happy we went out on the date, and I want to go again, hopefully without the random psychopath. But most of all, I'm just happy you're alright. She squeezed his hand and tried to force a laugh. Just don't expect me to save you again. I'm not cut out for being a hero. Still, is there something I can do to make it up to you? It was probably whatever pain meds they gave her, or maybe a near-death experience, or who knows. But a sudden boldness took over Fuyumi. Well, how about a kiss? A kiss? Izuku stammered, his mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water. Are you sure? She nodded, leaning forward. He was being so adorably awkward right now. Please? His lips were chapped, and hers still had dried blood on them, but it was a soft, pleasant kiss that barely lasted a breath. It made her heart race. What is going on in here? The worst possible person to enter her room by slamming the door wide open. Her father stood in the doorway, standing tall and proud as he observed the room. Are you two dating? He sounded almost too calm. Fuyumi nodded. We just had our first date today. Her father did not look pleased. The tension was so thick that Izuku doubted even a 100% Delaware smash could break through it. At the very least, Fuyumi was here with him, her injuries fully healed. She looked wonderful, even as she kept looking at her father, then back to him. She'd smile for a moment and then look down at the table. She was cute enough to almost make him forget about where they were and who they were with. Almost, but not quite. Oh, my goodness. All Might exploded from his seat to Izuku's right. He had already begun to eat the large meal that Fuyumi had made for this event. Young Fuyumi, did you make this? It is simply amazing. Oh, Fuyumi squeaked, jumping up in her seat, just enough to make her hair flop and her chest bounce. Izuku tried to look elsewhere, but his eyes were constantly drawn to Fuyumi. She was just so beautiful. Thank you, Mr. All Might, but my quirk makes cooking easy, so it's nothing special. Oh nonsense, his mother spoke softly from his left, a bit of Fuyumi's stew sitting in a spoon just waiting to enter her mouth. This was so embarrassing, his own mother and All Might were being so rude. Shoto hadn't even started to eat yet, to say nothing of Endeavor. You're a wonderful cook. I worry that Izuku might get fat if he marries you. Mom. He couldn't believe this, his mother was just making things worse. They were here because Endeavor had asked them all here to discuss his relationship with Fuyumi. This was not the time to be talking about marriage. Can you please not say stuff like that? What? Inko asked curiously as she took another bite of the stew and smiled. Why not? She can cook, has a good job lined up, and she's beautiful to boot. If I were you, Izuku, I'd be taking her a lot more seriously. I am taking her seriously, he mumbled, looking into the food before him. He glanced up and saw that Fuyumi was blushing. A lot. Her face a mask of crimson as she sucked in her lips, hands folded neatly in her lap, eyes pinched like she just ate a sour lemon. At least they were united in their mutual embarrassment. I'm inclined to agree. Izuku is one of the few men good enough to date my sister, Shoto said with a soft smile on his face. Izuku didn't know if he should thank him or punch him next week. He settled on more blushing. His face was starting to hurt from all this blushing. He couldn't take it anymore. He just wanted to go outside and scream. This was worse than any fight with any villain ever. And the worst part wasn't even here. He was going to have to fight with Endeavor of all people about why he should be allowed to date Fuyumi. Maybe they could settle with arm wrestling? Endeavor walked into the dining room, holding a small device and a remote in his hand. He was dressed up in a suit that could barely contain his heroic muscles. With a scrutinous look, Endeavor examined the food and gave a quick nod to Fuyumi before he began to set up. Endeavor boomed as he pointed the device at the wall. It almost looked like a miniature projector. And wait, since when were his mom and Endeavor on a first-name basis? They weren't friends on Facebook, were they? Could you get the lights for me? Sure thing, NG. Where was the stammering and blushing and general worriedness her mom showed when she talked to other pro heroes? Why was she smiling like her and Endeavor were good friends? They weren't meeting and hanging out, were they? The second the lights went off, Endeavor's miniature projector kicked on, buzzing lightly on the table. On the far wall, an image was displayed. It was stark white aside from bold letters that read, Todoroki, Midoriya compatibility. Kill me now. Fuyumi groaned, slamming her head on the table. She let out a low whine that was more of a groan. Ow. Take me with you, Izuku whispered, extending a hand across the table to hers. She took it and gave him a soft smile that was sweeter than any dessert. I thank you all for coming here tonight." Endeavor stood straight with one hand behind his back, the permanent scowl on his face lifted slightly. "The reason why I called you all here tonight is to discuss the relationship between my daughter Fuyumi Todoroki and the hero Deku, Izuku Midoriya." A click, and the projector shuddered, and the next slide was displayed. It was a photo of their date, specifically them at the hospital, with Fuyumi asleep and Izuku holding onto her hand also passed out. It might have been adorable if it wasn't creepy. Photo credit to my son Shoto. Endeavor closed his eyes and nodded towards Shoto. While he was happy to provide the photo, my son refused to provide any details about the relationship. However, using Facebook I was able to track down the beginnings of the relationship, but that is of little consequence. Was it possible to die from embarrassment? Izuku looked towards his girlfriend and saw that either the blood had drained from her face or her blush had reached white-hot levels. Another slide, this one a giant question mark with "will it work?" written under it. I will save my opinions for the end, but as we progress through these slides I would like you to ask yourselves if it will work. Great, he knew that Endeavor was not happy with their relationship, but this was just a whole other level. The slide changed again, showing a naked photo of Izuku from his last health screening. There were many stats listed on the side and several movies playing to demonstrate those stats. Izuku Midoriya is a contender for becoming #1 hero. His natural build is lean and quick, but he has above average muscle mass for other heroes of similar size. In terms of intellect and planning, he possesses a strategic mind that may be his greatest asset. Numerous times he has demonstrated the ability to overcome impossible odds by finding unique and creative solutions with what is available to him. There was a pause as Endeavor grunted, rolling his massive shoulders in discomfort, his scowl turning deeper and softer. He also has what the public calls the spirit of a true hero, in that if he can help someone he will, often at great harm to himself. Izuku wanted to die. "That's my boy young Midoriya, I knew that you would become an excellent hero." All Might slapped him on the back, taking a break from eating the lion's share of Fuyumi's dinner. "Oh my Izuku, look how buff you are." His mother gushed from his left. "I remember when you were just a pudgy little 12-year-old. He looked to Fuyumi, hoping that she wasn't staring at the photo. She was. Her face burned red, and her cup of tea was rapidly boiling away. A slight bit of drool could be seen on her face. Well, that was good. Probably. At least his girlfriend found him attractive enough to boil tea. Endeavor coughed until the room was silent. Deku's quirk appears to be a strength enhancer that allows him to exert his body beyond its physical limits. In many ways, it was similar to the quirk of his father Almighty. "Enji, we've been over this." All Might waved his hand in front of the machine for a moment, casting a mighty shadow. "I am not young Midoriya's father. I simply mentored him when I discovered we had similar quirks." "Yes," his mother joined in. "I even showed you the birth certificate." I remained unconvinced, but it matters little. Endeavor cracked his neck and continued. "Originally this quirk was unreliable in that it caused damage to Izuku himself. Thankfully this is no longer the case and he is able to go all out when needed." The slide changed again, showing a picture of Fuyumi during her high school graduation. At least Endeavor was human enough to realize that putting up a picture of his own daughter naked was not a good idea. "My daughter Fuyumi, below average physical ability, above average intellect, afraid of pain, and has no combat or situational awareness." "Thanks, Dad." Her quirk, Endeavor continued without even looking at his daughter, was once one I deemed it as a utility. It allows her to sense the exact temperatures of nearby people and objects. Furthermore, it allows her to change the temperatures without touching them. The upper limit of how fast and how much she can change is currently unknown and could make for a powerful quirk if Fuyumi had a mind for it. Fuyumi shifted in her seat, fiddling with her hands. Another click. Possibilities and conclusion. While the traits between Fuyumi and Izuku are not directly relatable, several combinations could blossom from their union. Although I cannot account for new quirks being created, I can say that a combination of their quirks would be spectacular, such as increasing the body's temperature to temperatures I can't even reach or decrease them well below freezing. Endeavor clicked, and the slideshow stopped. Only his flaming beard illuminated the room. After reviewing the possibilities, I have concluded that a marriage between Fuyumi and Izuku would be a great benefit and would lead to strong grandchildren. "Oh, you two would be so cute together." Inko jumped up from her seat and ran to the light switch. "I'm with Enji, you two most certainly should get married." This was not how he thought this was going to go. He thought he was going to have to fight for Fuyumi. There was no way that NG would be willing to let anybody date his daughter, right? He could see the man not caring what his daughter did. But to try and marry her off? I have a marriage contract here. I believe that you will find the terms are quite generous. They were treating this like a lawsuit. Or like Fuyumi was some car to be sold off. Fuyumi. She was pressed against the wall, crying. She was crying, and there was nothing he could do about it. His fists were clenched. He could feel himself slipping into full cowl. He needed to do something. He had to do something. Enough. Izuku roared, getting all eyes on him. His face was red with anger as he stood up. Listen, I care for Fuyumi. I like her a lot. But whether or not we get married is not up to you. It won't be because our quirks might be compatible, it will be because we decide it's something we want to do. He walked over to Fuyumi, his anger fading, as she looked up at him. The look he gave her made his heart skip a beat. It made his legs feel like they were made of jello. There was only a single thought that came into his mind that struck with the clarity of thunder. Fuyumi loved him. And he loved her. Come on, let's get out of here. He picked her up, she was so light and warm, even as she wrapped her arms around his neck. My hero, she whispered, making every hair on his body stand on end. They left the room quickly, before anybody could object or get over his sudden outburst. Once he stood in the crisp night air, Izuku finally let Fuyumi down. She placed a kiss on his cheek. I'm so sorry about that. No, it's okay, I think my mom was just as bad. I'm sorry I didn't say anything sooner, and I'm sorry that you had to see me naked, and that she placed a gentle finger on his lips. Izuku, I love that you worry so much, but let's just forget, okay? Why don't we go see a movie, or do I don't know something fun like karaoke? There was that look again. He wanted her to always look at him like that. It made him feel like he truly was the best hero in the world. Sounds like fun, let's go. Izuku offered her his arm, which she gladly took. Young Midoriya. All Might called from the entrance. He strode out in full heroic pose, chest out, and long swinging arms. A moment of your time, we have something of vital importance we must discuss. In private. Can it wait? Izuku looked at his hero, Fuyumi. We were just about to leave. I'm afraid it cannot. Fear not, it will take but a moment. Fuyumi released his arm and smiled. Go, Izuku, I can wait a little bit. You're just lucky I didn't get a cold. All Might led him around the corner and made sure that no one was listening. Listen to me, Izuku, this is of vital importance. You must not have children. Not you too? Izuku groaned, flapping his hands. He had expected his mother to be on the kid train, but he had hoped All Might would simply be happy for him. Can't you just? No, you misunderstand me, Izuku. I'm happy for your relationship. But do you remember how One for All is transferred? With DNA? What does that have to do with but I thought that only happened if you wanted to transfer it. It does, and most of the time you should be safe, and All Might scratched the back of his mighty head and gave a mighty blush. Just don't let her swallow, but besides that, when you are having sex with the intent of having a child, you may accidentally wish for the child to receive One for All. It happened once before with the third and fourth holders. Oh. Did Fuyumi want children? What would she say if she found out that they couldn't? All Might placed a mighty hand on Izuku's shoulder and squeezed. Listen, don't worry about it too much, have fun with your girlfriend. Just be careful, okay? Izuku nodded. Fuyumi hummed under the shower, enjoying the warm water as it flowed over her, taking away the day's dirt and grime. She needed to be absolutely clean and spotless for tonight. It was a special night, their anniversary. They went from being the shy guy and girl that liked each other to the shy guy and girl that were dating each other, and finally, on tonight 5 years ago, they became a shy girlfriend and boyfriend. It seems so long ago. Fuyumi smiled. Izuku had grown up into quite the young man, and Deku was quickly becoming a household name as the next symbol of justice. And she was now a full-fledged teacher at a school within walking distance of her home. That's right, Fuyumi laughed. It's our home now. The small little apartment they shared seemed an ill fit for one of the world's rising stars, but it was the best that a teacher like her could afford. And Izuku was more than happy to help with the bills, food, and various attempts to spoil her. It might have been small, but for the two of them, it was perfect. Though if they became a family, they'd have to get a bigger house. Fuyumi smiled and twisted her body at the thought. A family with Izuku, she had been dropping subtle hints that she was more than ready to be proposed to, from liking engagement rings on Pinterest to leaving her practice signatures as Fuyumi Midoriya and wedding magazines out in the open. Sure, she was far subtle, but that's just how they worked. Her phone vibrated on the countertop. Then again, and again, a fourth time that was interrupted by the fifth, a sixth, and seventh time. Someone really wanted to get a hold of her. With her body wrapped in a towel, she stepped out of the shower and glanced at the foggy mirror. A bunch of messages from Izuku flashed on her phone. Izuku, I don't know how to say this, and I've been wanting to say this for a while. With actual words, but I can't think of losing you scares me. I never did tell you how I got my quirk, but it comes down to this. It was a gift from All Might. In order to transfer the quirk, I need to pass my DNA on to someone and want them to obtain my power. Which is the problem. I want to start a family with you, Fuyumi, I really do. But if we were to try and have a child of our own, I'm afraid that I might accidentally give the child my quirk. Which could, at worst, kill all three of us. Izuku, I'm sorry. I understand if you want to break up with me. Izuku? Wait, don't read that. I shouldn't spoil tonight. Izuku, I love you. Izuku, please don't read that big message. Izuku, just ignore it. Izuku, just ignore me. I love you. Fuyumi placed her phone down on the countertop. Her mouth was a hard line, so her father was right in a way. Izuku really did get his quirk from All Might. But now that quirk would prevent them from having a family. One that they both wanted. A smile cracked her silence, and she couldn't help but let out a laugh. The laugh built and built until she was clutching her stomach, tears falling from her eyes. Izuku wants a family with me. That was what was important. A real honest-to-goodness family, filled with love and kindness. He wants a family with me. Fuyumi wiped the tears from her eyes and began to get dressed. A small dark green dress she had gotten specifically for tonight, her hair tied into a loose ponytail that Izuku absolutely loved to play with. Sure, they wouldn't be going out anywhere tonight. Just a comfortable at-home dinner for two awkward introverts. Once she was dressed and presentable, Fuyumi opened the bathroom door and walked out into their apartment. It was small, clean, and homey. The only real mess was her papers that were scattered about the coffee table. Izuku stood on their modest balcony looking over the city that he was sworn to protect. He looked so handsome in his white dress shirt and forest green slacks. He was so tall and muscular, practically bursting out of his shirt. Fuyumi placed a hand on his back. He looked at her, his face marred with tears and filled with concern and worry. It was so unlike the heroic man she had fallen in love with, it almost looked like he had given up. With her hand still on her phone, she hit send, still smiling at him. His phone vibrated, and Izuku looked at it, then looked at her. Izuku, check it please. Fuyumi, we can adopt. Wait, so you're not upset that we can't have kids? Izuku asked, frantically looking at his phone and her. You still want to be with me? You're overreacting to Izuku. Fuyumi laughed, taking a step towards him, moving into his arms. She pressed her head against his broad chest and sighed. Me not being pregnant isn't something I'm going to fret over. There are so many children without parents in the world. I'm sure all of them would love to call you dad. Fuyumi, Izuku blubbered before he wrapped his mighty arms around her. I love you so much. I know. She grabbed his face and pulled him into a kiss that showed him that he meant the world to her. And don't ever forget that you're a hero, Izuku. That means that no matter what challenge you face, you will find a way to beat it. I thought that meant that I had a habit of meddling. He kissed her again, moving from her mouth to her cheeks to her neck as he held her tightly. But I like your version too. You better, now you spent all night cooking a wonderful dinner for me, and I can't wait to eat your slightly undercooked steak, Fuyumi said, giving him a light push. Hey, you said you wouldn't judge my cooking with your quirk. Izuku pouted and stomped on her. Fuyumi walked with an extra sway in her hips. She could only show Izuku. I'm just happy you insisted on cooking so much. Alright class, today we're going to be covering basic algebra. Fuyumi almost laughed at the collective groan that spread through her classroom. Oh come on now, it's not that hard. Just pretend that it's a puzzle here. She began to scribble a simple equation on the board. X plus 2 equals 3. Now, I know this looks scary. After all, numbers don't go with letters, you can't add an A and a 3. But in this, X just represents a number that isn't known. Her class was silent, too silent. And then there were giggles. A lot of giggles. Did she write something funny? She didn't accidentally draw a penis or butt on the board again. No, that couldn't be it. There was nothing loot on the board. Was one of the kids messing with their quirks? Must be Naruto trying to play a prank on her. Teacher, a girl in the front row whined. Sakura, by the sounds of it, the girl that normally tattled when Naruto was up to no good. There's a strange man behind you. There is? Fuyumi spun, and her heart stopped. Izuku was standing in her classroom, well-dressed and well-groomed, as always. An attempt to tame his wild hair was at least made. But the most shocking thing was the giant bouquet of white and red roses that reminded her of her hair. She dropped her book. Izuku. What are you doing here? He fumbled and tried to find a place to put the flowers. Can you hold this for a second? I didn't think this through. Well, I mean I did. I spent a lot of time thinking about it, a whole lot, non-stop actually. Izuku, Fuyumi stopped him and took the flowers from him, placing them on her desk. You're rambling again. There were two things that could make Izuku ramble incoherently. Quirks and her. It was adorable and heartwarming to know that she had the ability to overwork his brain without even trying. Now, what are you here for? She brushed a bit of hair out of her face and examined her students that were in silent awe and amusement. I kind of have a class to teach. Oh, well, Shoto said that this was a good idea, and well, her brother? This had horrible ideas written all over it, but what could it be? It had to be something that involved her teaching, Izuku bringing her flowers. Wait. Why was Izuku getting on one knee? Where did that box come from? Oh god, was it really happening? This wasn't a joke, right? Her brother was either an evil genius or a true hero, and who the hell cares? Izuku was on one knee in front of her holding a box. She couldn't breathe. Her body had stopped breathing. Her heart was pounding faster and faster, sending all of her available blood to her cheeks. Fuyumi Todoroki. Izuku stared at her feet, biting her lip as he began to open the box. It was a ring, a beautiful diamond ring. Will you marry me? Yes, she breathed, barely able to move a single muscle in her body. Somehow she managed to hold her hand out to him, her ring finger eagerly awaiting her new ring. Her entire class awed and awed as Izuku slowly slid the ring onto her finger. Izuku, she asked, still staring at the ring. Yes? Can you take me to the nurse's office? I think I'm going to faint. A second later she passed out into Izuku's warm, strong arms. The end. Thanks for watching my video. I hope you guys are doing well. See you in the next video. Till then, sayonara.